Hi, everyone. This is the Canadian Foreign Policy Hour. Hope everyone is doing well this evening. I am coming to you from Georgiagay, which is a long-winded meeting place of various First Nations, otherwise known as Montreal. Canadian Foreign Policy Hour is a weekly critical look at Canada's role internationally, and there are lots of developments this week. So I'll get right to the discussion. A story that actually was about from 2 weeks ago, but I only read a few days ago because it was I missed an article in the business section of the Globe Mail. Was titled "Federal Government Should Be Prepared to Scrutinize Sale of African Copper Mine." Industry veteran Lassonde says. And basically, a Canadian company with a major mine in Botswana is trying to sell, and there are some Chinese companies interested in the mine, and within the new worries about geopolitical tensions with China, the Canadian government has brought in new legislation around geopolitically sensitive minerals and who can buy them. But again, this is copper not in Canada, but in Botswana. Canadian government did the same kind of thing with some mines in a mine in Argentina, and so they basically are defining that they have the right to determine what countries' companies can buy mineral assets that are in Argentina and Botswana, basically wherever in the world. On Canadian Dimension today, Owen Schock has a piece titled "Ottawa Silent as Panama Rises Up Against Canadian Copper Mine." I mentioned that last week. First Quantum, major mine in Panama, biggest foreign investor in the country, and it is being the mass protests have forced the government to bring in a referendum on the concession. And there's lots of criticism around royalty rates, environmental issues, Indigenous rights. And Owen Schock kind of looks through it and talks a little bit about how Canada has supported the mining company, just the extent of the opposition, the Canadian government's silence on the referendum question, etc. The New York Times had a piece titled "Study Finds Global Warming is Increasing at a Faster Pace. More and more evidence that the 1.5 threshold is going to be far surpassed." The Globe and Mail business section had a story titled "EDC Export Development Canada uses environmental review directive on fewer than 1% of transactions, Auditor General." So that's Canada's export credit agency is basically not taking into account ecological issues that they said they would in offering up insurance, financing for exports, etc. The Auditor General, the Parliamentary Budget Officer, this week, Thursday, maybe Wednesday, I forget what day, they came down with a report on the plan to purchase 88 F-35 fighter jets. And they concluded it's going to cost $19.8 billion upfront and a total of $74 billion over the 30-year life cycle. So it's actually a little bit above what the No Fighter Jet Coalition had estimated. Incredible amount of money. Basically, nothing. From what I could tell, nothing. The NDP didn't come out critical. Got reported briefly, and it's just confirmed that we're going to spend this incredible sum on these fighter jets that have no defensive purpose. They only can be basically useful to bomb other countries, and of course, it's a huge taxpayer contribution to the military industrial complex in the U.S., but also their all their satellites in Canada and elsewhere. I'm not going to get into Remembrance Day stuff. I think maybe next week I'll get into a discussion of Remembrance Day. But one thing I noticed is the NDP foreign affairs critic Heather McPherson. She participated in an event on the weekend, and she said it was an honor to address the Vimy Academy community at the Remembrance Day ceremony. This year, it is more important than ever to honor those who gave the ultimate sacrifice and to continue their efforts towards creating a more peaceful and just world for all. And why I note the NDP foreign affairs critic participating in this, and I won't get into it in detail, but Remembrance Day largely is a justification for war. And you'll see that obviously play out right now, where real anti-war would be stop, ceasefire now, stop the onslaught in Gaza, but that certainly won't be what is going to be coming out of our Remembrance Day this week. And Heather McPherson and the NDP, who've with this huge push of activism on the Palestine question, have started calling for a ceasefire. They didn't attend any of the demonstrations this week, the biggest anti-war demonstration since 2003. No NDP MP, from what I can tell, attended any of those demonstrations across the country. But it's okay to go to a Remembrance Day event. That's obviously much less politically sensitive from the NDP's perspective. Also, on the note of Remembrance Day or war, there is growing evidence. I've mentioned this briefly recent weeks, but the evidence is getting stronger and stronger that obviously Ukraine's counteroffensive failed, and the Ukrainian officials are starting to kind of admit this. The New York Times had a piece from titled "Ukrainians' Military Success Isn't a Given," Zelensky says. And another piece from the head of the defense minister, Zaluzny, now admits war stalemate and real possibility of defeat of Ukraine. So that's kind of increasingly the tone of what's coming out of Ukraine, and now Russia's increasingly on the offensive in different parts. And we'll see where this all goes, but this is definitely not looking good from Ukraine's perspective, and a whole lot of dying has taken place for what is would have been much better to have negotiations 6-8 months, year ago, but that's not what transpired. On China, the federal government barred WeChat from federal government phones. It's a Chinese app, social media. I've never used it, so I don't know exactly what it is. This was the third Chinese technology brand that's been restricted by the federal government in the past 16 months. I think obviously Huawei, and I think they also restricted TikTok on federal government. There was a pretty big ban against Huawei. 5G, and also they've restricted TikTok, I believe, on federal government phones. On China, there was another incident where the HMCS Ottawa was going through contested waters or close to Chinese territorial waters, and apparently, according to the Canadian government, the Chinese fighter jets buzzed a Canadian military helicopter, and apparently launched a flare in front of the aircraft. And Defense Minister Bill Blair came out and attacked Beijing as being unprofessional and unsafe. And of course, he said this was all about freedom of navigation in international waters. So they continue to push these sort of aggressive kind of moves with Canadian naval vessels patrolling. In this case, it's the Paracel Islands. And the Financial Times had a piece, kind of a big picture level, sort of geopolitical piece. I think that's an important development. And it said, quote, China passed a significant milestone last fall. For the first time since its economic opening more than 4 decades ago, it traded more with developing countries than the US, Europe, and Japan combined. It was one of the clearest signs that China and the West are going in different directions as tensions increase over trade, technology, security, and other thorny issues. And I think that this is fairly significant geopolitically. I think it speaks to the fact that the Belt and Road Initiative has been successful. It speaks to the fact that there's a whole bunch of countries now that their main trading partner is China, or China at least is a bigger trading partner than the US, even a country like Brazil, even countries in the Western Hemisphere. And this, of course, has fairly substantive geopolitical ramifications. And I think it's going to increasingly be shaping the world as we go forward. On the horrors we're seeing, the absolute horrors we're seeing in Gaza, we're now over 10,000 dead in about 4 weeks. 5,000 children. I think they say there's still 1,000 under the rubble. The director of the New York office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights said this is a textbook case of genocide. The European ethno-nationalist settler colonial project in Palestine has entered its final phase. And then he resigned. Israel's dropped equivalent to nearly 2 atomic bombs that the US dropped on Hiroshima. And the level of we talk about 10,000 dead, but it's also, I think I don't want the number, 37,000 I think I saw of injured, huge tens of thousands of buildings destroyed. And one person on Twitter posted, Canada calls for 5-minute water break in Israel bombing campaign. That's the position of Justin Trudeau. There's the clip that some people may have seen where he's in Washington, D.C. He's asked about a ceasefire, and he starts saying it's time for Israel to cease, and then he stops himself halfway before saying ceasefire, and then catches himself and says humanitarian pause, just repeats the talking point. So the Canadian government can't even call for a ceasefire. Now, of course, calling for a ceasefire is not, that's a kind of bare minimum. That in and of itself, Canada, the US calling for a ceasefire would not guarantee a ceasefire. Calling for a ceasefire and then bringing in some pain if Israel doesn't bring about a ceasefire, that is, something closer to that would be, in my opinion, the kind of bare minimum of what we need to see right now. But they're not even willing to call for a ceasefire at this point. And what Israel's doing, I think there's lots of things that Israel's doing. I think part of what it's doing is just slaughtering for the sake of it, in the sense that it's for every Israeli killed, they always need 10 times Palestinians killed. So if they say there was something around 1,400, though I know that number hasn't been exactly confirmed, but more than 1,000 Israelis that were killed. So you need to kill at least 10,000 Palestinians. That's part of it. I don't believe that they expect to, quote unquote, eradicate Hamas. I just don't think that's maybe they can kill most of their Hamas leadership, but they know that the killing they're doing right now, whether they can kill most of Hamas's leadership or most of Hamas's fighters, you are making people so angry and so bitter that invariably Hamas or some variation of that is clearly not. I mean, that's going to rise possibly even stronger. So the other part to what they seem to be planning to do is to actually, and this in some ways I think has a bit more of a logic to it, is ethnically cleanse Gaza. And Zionism has a fundamental problem in that the objective is always to have as much land with as few non-Jews as possible. And right now, historic Palestine, it's about half and half, maybe even a little bit more non-Jews. And so if you could drive out 2 million or more from Gaza, demographically speaking, that would be quite a good thing from Zionism's perspective. And we saw that there's the Israeli ministry that has been discussing this plan to drive out Palestinians into Sinai and then possibly spread them around the world. And you're seeing like the number 2 of Mossad made some comment like that, sent 20, if you said 100 countries in the world took 25,000 Palestinians each, that would deal with the population, and that would be a real humanitarian thing. There's a proposal floating around there to talk about Canada taking hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from Gaza. So I think that is an element. I don't know if the Israelis believe they can succeed in doing this, but that is they obviously need to ramp up the pressure on Egypt, which is part of what they're doing right now. So that seems to be something in the background of what's going on. On Friday, I had the opportunity to talk to our wonderful foreign minister about all the wonderful things she's been doing.
Madame Jolie, why are you enabling Israel's crimes against Palestinians? You have blood on your hand, Madame Jolie. You went to Israel to support what the massacres, more than 4,000 Palestinian children killed. Madame Jolie, tu devrais avoir honte. Dans le sang des Palestiniens sur tes mains. Madame Jolie, tu devrais avoir honte. Tu soutiens les massacres palestiniens contre les Palestiniens. Plus de 4,000 enfants morts, Madame Jolie.
So that went very well from my perspective. I'm not sure from her perspective. The walk of shame that she did walking away was I thought quite nice or interesting. That was great because it was actually really close to where I was working half a block away, and just left the cafe and walked over, and I figured out where she was. They kept it hidden, but I called the venue, and I deduced a couple, anyways, and I deduced some stuff, and then I called the venue and got the person to confirm it. Someone who, of course, didn't know what I was trying to figure out, and I went quite early because I knew I wouldn't get into the press conference because I figured her people were going in. RCMP would block me, so I went by just to the venue, and she just happened to be kind of like milling about in the front, and I just obviously quickly walked in and did that thing. Now, this is what's interesting. One of the things interesting in this is that, so on Twitter, it's like more than 1 million people have viewed it on mine, and a couple other people who posted it. So huge circulation on Twitter. Somebody posted online that Al Kabar, which is apparently a big newspaper in Algeria, that they posted on their front page, and I can see a version in French. It's mostly an Arabic paper, but apparently they have some stuff in French, and I can see a version in French online of what they did. Also, Turkish media got in touch. I did an interview. It's all over in Turkish kind of media milieu, and I did an interview with a Turkish reporter about it. But of course, no, I can't see anything from Canadian media. There was a camera person there because it was a press conference she was about to speak at. There was one camera. I don't know if there was other journalists in the room. I think that's definitely possible. There were. The camera person was there. I didn't do a deep search, but I looked around a bit. I couldn't find anything online. It's possible it was a Radio Canada reporter and they mentioned it for 10 seconds on Radio Canada. I don't know, but no Canadian media ever reached out to discuss the matter. But Turkish media did, right? And other media internationally reported on it. But that's the state of the media on this stuff. They certainly don't want to talk about saying that Canadian officials have blood on their hands. In the House of Commons, on the note of blood in the hands and Canada's position, in the House of Commons, Jagmeet Singh did raise the issue of Canadian special forces, and he said, "Can the Prime Minister confirm that no Canadian troops will take part in the war?" We know there are Canadian special forces on the ground. We don't know exactly what they're doing. They say that they're there just for security and evacuation, embassy security and evacuation, but we don't know. And but the National Post has a piece, the editorial board, titled "Canada and its Allies Should Send Troops into Gaza." And so they're explicitly calling for Canada to send troops into Gaza as part of some sort of like mop-up mission after Israel kills 20,000 or whatever the plan is, 25, 50, whatever their ultimate final number is, and that Canadian troops with other European and Arab countries sort of take over Gaza. That's something that's been circulated around. So that's the National Post pushing that. So we're talking about sort of open talk about Canada participating directly militarily, which seems like a pretty extreme development if that were to take place. Now, the battles, I think, on this question, there's the big picture, what Canada's position is, and obviously all kinds of forms of Canadian backing for Israel. I'm not going to get into all that, of course. That's all going on. The recent positions, etc. And then there's the sort of what's going on in Canadian political life associated with this. And there's a whole lot going on, of course. As the CBC journalist, I don't know her name, the first woman who wore a hijab on air, Gisela something. She pointed out that the Journalists for Human Rights Gala in Toronto that just took place a few days ago, basically nothing about Gaza, even though Israel's killed more than 30 journalists, and it's by far the most violent situation for journalists anywhere in the world. We have the Sarah Jama kerfuffle. That's some sort of interesting developments on that front. The Ontario NDP leader, Marit Stiles, has apparently she deleted her tweets that announced Jama's ousting from the caucus, and her tweet where she called on Jama to retract her statement calling for a ceasefire, and to and then also her statement about rationalizing Jama's removal. So Stiles called for Jama to retract her statement. In fact, what we see now is Jama hasn't done that. Stiles has. There's a group of NDP activists and employees that signed a letter saying they will not have anything to do with the party because of this development. There was a public letter that Just Peace Advocates, Canadian Foreign Policy Institute, signed by people like Gabor Mate, Roger Waters, David Perry from Arcade Fire, defending JAMA, opposing her censure by the Ontario legislature, and her being kicked out of the NDP caucus. Reportedly, and this is on Twitter, and this needs to be confirmed, but apparently the Calgary police yesterday, they had their demonstration, major demonstration in Calgary yesterday, actually arrested someone for chanting "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." So apparently someone was arrested for doing that, saying that. York University was served with a $15 million lawsuit, claiming it's anti-Semitic. Today, it was reported that QP is being sued for $500,000 by 25 employees or 25 Jewish members who are claiming that there's anti-Semitism within the union. Of course, this is part of the onslaught against Fred Hahn, the head of QP Ontario, for standing with Palestinians. That Howard Levitt, who's this lawyer who writes in the Financial Post and business section of National Post, who is a very right-wing person across the board, but is just a totally fanatic Zionist. He had a piece, and he's had a whole series of these, but this week, he has a weekly column, I believe. It says, "Consequence coming for students who sign letter condoning Hamas." So he's basically saying that employers shouldn't be hiring any of these law students. There was a public letter by lawyers defending law students' right to express themselves in favor of Palestinian rights that was just released today, kind of pushing back against this onslaught. But there's this incredible onslaught of these law firms, these voices within the legal world of saying, you're not going to you're not going to be able to be hired, etc., if you stand with the Palestinians. A staffer for a Liberal Party in Quebec was fired, according to reports in Radio Canada, for I think it was, I'm not sure it was even posting, it was liking some posts about protests in support of Palestinian rights. B'nai B'rith is going at, there's high school students that protested, and B'nai B'rith is sort of like trying to dox these 15, 16-year-olds for protesting on Palestine. The Royal Ontario Museum removed a portion of an exhibition that depicted Palestinian burial rituals, and they basically said that Palestine was too controversial right now, and they push us. Apparently, they have reverse course. They say it was heightened sensitivities over the artist's work. They have reverse course. Here in the Montreal area, Hampstead, municipality of 7,000, is announced that they're going to bring in fines of $1,000 for anyone who rips down posters of the hostages that Hamas has. So there's been people ripping down these posters all around the world, and the Zionists are having total panic about this. So Hampstead has decided they're going to, the next council meeting, they're going to bring in $1,000 fines, special fines, just for ripping down this type of poster, this specific poster, because it's nothing worse than ripping down a poster that's about framing the Israelis as the victims to enable the genocidal policies in Gaza. Now, Hampstead is this kind of this is a remarkable place. Hampstead is this community that has no businesses. It's a second wealthiest municipality in Quebec after Westmount. It's 75% Jewish. It comes out of the Garden City movement in London in the late 1800s, which was this sort of well-to-do people in London moving to the suburbs as part of this cleanliness, sort of getting away from the mob, the rabble, whatever. And so Hampstead was built in just outside of Montreal as part of that in the 1920s, and it was basically a WASP, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant elite kind of community for many, many years, and basically totally exclusive. Again, there's no shops. And basically over the years, it's become more than 3/4 Jewish. And the city council there, the last meeting, they passed a resolution saying Canada should move its embassy to Jerusalem. A whole bunch of other resolutions of anti-Palestinian resolutions, and quite frankly, this is quite a negative comment. It's this exclusive, staying away from others community that, quite honestly, from an urban planning perspective, shouldn't even exist. Hampstead, and it's this basically hub of Zionist influence and exclusiveness on the outskirts of Montreal. And they decided to fine, and it got a lot of media attention, defining anyone who rips down posters. My plan is actually to go to Hampstead soon and try to find some of these posters. We probably don't even actually have any of them in Hampstead, because it's I doubt anyone, I don't know what kind of public place we even have posters there. But anyways, so the protests we saw this weekend are a hub of the framing of it all is this it's all about anti-Semitism. The Toronto Sun has, front page of today's paper is titled "Hate," a picture of a protest, and hate now in the open. Warmington, I think it's Joe Warmington, the columnist, has a piece titled "Canada is starting to look like 1930s Germany." So, according to the officialdom, or a major sector of officialdom in Canada, this is it's all anti-Semitism. All that, these people who don't like 5,000 babies being killed, it's just all anti-Semitism. And the level of weaponization of anti-Semitism that's taken place in recent weeks is completely off the charts. And this is as someone who wrote a piece back in 2016 saying that anti-Semitism was the most abused term in Canada. And things have gotten way worse in general since then, but in the last few weeks have just gone off into really kind of a crazy territory. As part of this, one side to this is the whole using the Nazi Holocaust as a stick to beat Palestinians. And we saw a number of developments on that front in that whole process. And so British Columbia brought in mandatory Holocaust education this week. It was announced at a community center in Vancouver that has, flies Israeli flags, that is run by the patron of the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs. And the premier of BC, when he announced it, made this decision for mandatory Holocaust education, he explicitly connected it to recent developments. Similarly, Ontario, which last year had mandated it in grade 6, has now strengthened it. It was already in the Canadian studies curriculum in grade 10, but they've now added Holocaust education in grade 10, strengthened the scope of it. And also that they did that this week, and they also announced $650,000 for CIJA and Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center education projects. Now, of course, CIJA and Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center are genocide lobby groups. So we are really seeing the genocide, history of genocide, being mobilized to justify genocidal policies today. Also, the chief of police in Toronto and a bunch of the other top officers, last week they participated in this CIJA United Jewish Appeal Toronto visit to the Toronto Holocaust Museum. This is tied to this idea that they're trying to push that these protests are hate, right? And this is all part of this process. And so we're seeing, what Finkelstein, somebody online said that Finkelstein was the most vindicated author in history. And he put a picture of Finkelstein's book, The Holocaust Industry, next to the Israeli ambassador to the UN, who I think it was on Monday, he wore the yellow star, right? The yellow star that the Nazis put on Jews in Poland and elsewhere to identify them as Jews as part of the extermination process. And he wore that. So here you got a nuclear armed state that's backed by the world's hegemon that's committing mass atrocities as playing itself as the victim, right, with the yellow star. And so this person was highlighting how vindicated Finkelstein is, or in his thesis from that book 20 plus years ago. So we are seeing a lot of this, all this imagery linking what Hamas did to the Nazi Holocaust. Totally absurd, totally nonsensical. I mean, most people in Gaza, they were driven from their homes, for God's sake. 70% of Palestinians in Gaza were ethnically cleansed in 47, 48. The idea that their hatred is just based upon them being Jewish is ridiculous. This is about them being Israelis, settlers who basically 75 years of oppressing them. Now you see this, in terms of being anti-Palestinian today. All you have to do to be an active agent, I mean, there's obviously a passive, but active agent is to just post about anti-Semitism, quite frankly. So you see like people like Kurt Phillips, anti-racist Canada, right? This activist in Alberta, he's fighting the far right, fascist kind of whatever guy, prominent online, and he tweets about, he shows images of like anti-Semitic, legitimately, and not the totally dubious, you protested against Palestinian babies being killed and you're anti-Semitic, but I mean legitimate, actual anti-Jewish, graffiti and stuff like that. He posts these pictures. Somebody scrawled something on a garage door and stuff like that, and he posts these pictures and talks about the dangerous increasing anti-Semitism. Well, you go through his Twitter, and he hasn't said anything about the whole media and political establishment supporting these genocidal policies in Gaza. And yes, racist graffiti should be criticized, no doubt. But if all you do is that, in this climate, you are actively being anti-Palestinian. You are actively being a racist, genocidal enabler. And same thing with someone like Jesse Brown from Canadaland. Same thing. Nothing about Palestinian rights, but this Yiddish cultural center in New York. Someone wrote "Free Palestine" on it. And in fact, you can even debate whether that actually was anti-Semitic, because when you look at this Yiddish cultural center, I think it's actually more complicated than they're presenting it. Nonetheless, this is the kind of stuff that you can just be you're an active enabler of genocide just by not talking about Palestinians and talking about rising anti-Semitism. Now, the Zionists are really, really, really pushing this hostage thing. This is their thing. Okay, so there was a meeting, article, hostages' families press PM for more help. That was a Globe on Tuesday. The front page of the Montreal Gazette on Friday was a meal for the missing. And so the Combined Jewish Appeal of Montreal, Federation Combined Jewish Appeal, organized a Shabbat, and they had like a table for the 240 Hamas hostages, and front page was the head of the Federation looking distraught about these hostages. And so this was really the thing. And on on Thursday, I think, I was across town for actually ask a minister in the Quebec Liberal government about them opposing a ceasefire, which I later did. I'm not going to show that video. Can you see on my Twitter? And as I was walking back, I was walking past McGill, and I saw these people with Israeli flags, and so I went over to this rally, and I hung out for a while. I photographed one of the people with a Israel Defense sweater on. This guy's really happy to. I asked to take a photo, and he was just like so proud of himself with his Israeli military thing on. Now the whole rally was this release the hostages kind of framing. And so what I did was I tried to lead the crowd in a chant.
Offer another chant. Kill more Palestinian children. Kill more Palestinian children! Kill more Palestinian children! Kill more Palestinian Kill more Palestinian children! Kill more Palestinian children! Kill more Palestinian children! 4,000 is not enough! 4,000 Palestinian children is not enough! Kill more children! Kill more children! Kill.
So I took their what they were really calling for, and I just put it out there. That video on my Twitter, it says, according to, I don't know how Twitter does these things, and it's probably not correct exact numbers, but it has 10 million views. The Israeli government, basically Netanyahu's spokesperson, quote tweeted about it. And some people have been, I know some person, friend of the Canadian Foreign Policy Hour, was critical of doing that. I, of course, completely stand behind the fact that if you're going to go to a rally with Israeli flags and IDF shirts while they're killing 5,000 Palestinian children, you have to own up to what you were actually calling for. The business about protecting the hostages, even in and of itself, a lot of the hostages' family members in Israel are calling not for more bombing because they understand that's not a high likelihood that there leads to their family members being killed. They are calling for the deal that Hamas has put out there, which is they'll exchange hostages for the Palestinian hostages. And in fact, there's a whole lot more Palestinian hostages. Just in the last 4 weeks, it's more than 1,700 that Israel's detained, including people like 12 years old. And of course, there's thousands and thousands more from before, many who have not even been tried in any way. So if you want to really talk about hostages, let's talk about hostages. Let's release all the hostages, a whole lot more Palestinians. And but that's not what they're trying to do here, right? Of course, this is all about victim. We're the victims. As we back slaughtering 10,000, we're the victims. That's the hostages rally kind of the aim of raising the issue. But they're pushing it hard. The Israel lobby is pushing it hard, and they're going to keep pushing it. Now, this weekend, there were the biggest demonstrations, I think, in most cities, the biggest demonstrations they've ever had in solidarity with Palestinian human rights, solidarity for Palestinian rights. Here in Montreal, it was 50,000. It's massive. I walked from the front to the back, walked all around it. There's drone footage. The reports from Toronto, massive. I heard that the police on TV was saying it was at least 20,000. Others are saying it's 40,000. Ottawa, people saying over 10,000. There's images from Yellowknife, people protesting in the snow up in Yellowknife. Not big numbers, but a couple dozens. More than 30 cities across the country had protests. So clearly, this is the biggest. This is not just the biggest Palestine solidarity. This is the biggest anti-war internationalist protests that have happened since 2003 with Iraq. Certainly myself for this demonstration, I've been to bigger. The climate march in 2019 here in Montreal was bigger, and there were a couple of demos, at least one I remember being at for the 2012 student strike that were bigger. But as the only other demos that I can think of that were bigger were the 2003 Iraq War protests here in Montreal. We also on Wednesday, with very short notice, got 500 people out to a protest when Melanie Joly, the foreign minister, was speaking, and there are lots of actions in lots of other places across the country. So we do have, you know, the biggest, some of the biggest internationalist mobilizations in recent memory, but we still have a government that can't call for a ceasefire. We have not a single. You have MPs, ministers, even the prime minister who've been to rallies supporting the genocide, but you can't even get one NDP MP out to a 50,000 person protest in Montreal opposing a war. So it's a very fascinating political dynamic where you have the global news. So for their coverage of the protest here in here on Saturday, they covered it, and they covered it fairly, you know, the second, third, fairly high up in the news. And the announcer said there was hundreds gathered in Montreal. They said that as they showed this image up St. Catherine Street of at least 10,000 people. But that was just, you know, you could go the other direction, had something close to that, another direction had something close to that, another direction had something close. So they were able to turn this mass demonstration, they were able to minimize it kind of remarkably. So we have a situation where the political elite and the media elite and the whole kind of political structure is on board for what Israel is doing, and yet we have mass opposition at the grassroots level. There is a really intense racist backlash, particularly on Twitter, from Zionist forces, and calling for deporting, you know, anyone who's not a citizen who went to these protests. This is a hate rally, and therefore we should deport them. There's also elements of the organized Israel lobby world who are talking about how this is a demographic issue, and so basically there is more higher proportion of young people are non-white, and they are the source of this anti-Semitism as they frame it in these protests or in these sympathy for Palestinians. You know, where this goes, I don't know. I think that this is clearly eye-opening for a lot of people in terms of what Zionism is and how vile of a political movement and how horrendous Israel is as a state. And also, I think eye-opening for, you know, what Canada is about. I mean, anyone who now believes that we are, you know, supporting Ukraine just because we believe in, you know, international law, you just I don't think anyone mildly progressive is going to believe that anymore after what's gone on in the last month. But you know, where this goes, medium long term, it's not clear. But I think I'll leave it at that. And if people have comments and questions, and I will try to make Laura a co-host if she's here. I think I've made you a co-host, Laura. I can't see anyone with their hand raised right now. I don't know if that's a problem on my front or.
Okay, so finally I'm unmuted. Yeah, it is a problem at your front because there are a number of hands raised. Okay, let's start with Yuri. I'll try to unmute you. Yuri, go ahead. Okay.
Okay. You guys hear me?
Yep. Go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Well, Eve, I just want to say, having seen, through secondhand, through a mutual comrade of ours, Morgan, you confronting Justin Trudeau while there was a mass protest, mass solidarity protest for Palestine, and you confronting Melanie Jolie. The only, response I could say was that, wow, Eve Engler is a total badass. So thanks. Thanks. So again, thanks very much for all you do, and it is very great to see so many solidarity protests and to see so many indigenous people, so many Jewish anti-Zionists, really, saying loud and clearly, "Not in our name." Along with Palestine voices and in the diaspora and and all that. My question to you is. I know you've criticized an important Indigenous voice in Canada, Cindy Blackstock, or I might be getting her name wrong, for not speaking. For not speaking up for Palestine and in general anti-imperialist issues. And I think recently she was tweeting a bunch of stuff denouncing what Israel is doing. Pamela Pomader, another person who doesn't really speak on anti-imperialist issues, even when it's related to indigenous people, in Bolivia and so forth. I saw on her Twitter her retweeting and sharing a bunch of articles and and speaking out on on Israel. And I recently read, that apparently there's also a lot of efforts, even in the United States, of the Israel lobby trying to get Native American voices, celebrities, but even the day-to-day activists, the day-to-day academic, to actually be all pro Israel, because the sort of stuff that you addressed in your book, Canada and Israel building apartheid. So my question are a lot of the Black Lives Matter voices and activists in Canada and Indigenous people, in Canada, are we seeing a lot of them sort of speaking out, or is it mostly just or is it mostly just kind of like activists that we probably know, people that we come across in the online world and whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing, I mean, like what we're seeing is just so monstrous, right? I mean, you have to be like real committed to the establishment, or really committed to Zionism, to not find what's taking place just horrendous. So I think that I haven't seen Cindy Blackstock and specifically what she's been saying or not saying on Twitter. But it makes sense to me that the images are so horrible that there's breaking through, and somebody who was much more cautious previously. She's on the listed on the website of Erwin Kotler's Raoul Wallenberg Center as a fellow. And she's at McGill, and McGill, McGill really lauds her. And McGill, of course, the administration has been, very aggressively anti-Palestinian and very undemocratic, and with students passing the Palestine Solidarity Resolution there. So that's what I've written about her. I think Pamela Pomader is in a little bit different category. I think she's somebody who's a bit more left-wing or a bit more anti-imperialist, though of course principally focused on indigenous issues. But yeah, I think that the horrors what we're seeing is so great, and it is also true that the Israel lobby does devote significant resources. I've been doing this for at least since the early 2000s. To bringing First Nations leaders to Israel, and consciously trying to woo more, I don't know, you call it maybe more moderate sectors, to blunt efforts to link the European settler colonial project here and decolonization here within Turtle Island, within Canada, and with regards to Palestinians. So that's no doubt that that's something that the Israel lobby is works at, and they are successful to varying degrees on doing that.
Okay, Elizabeth, you're up.
Okay, I have two things. What we were just talking about, Indigenous people. This is the one thing I see. They may be there. I'm sure there's lots because they're mixed in our society. But I'm planning to write to every Indigenous organization and tell them what they are seeing is exactly, the weapons are different of what happened to their people. Because if the Indigenous people stood up in Canada, let me tell you, that would be the finish of it. Right then and there, because they're like Palestinians. And I don't care what McGill's been doing or anything else, but that's my task for this month, is to get this done and make phone calls, because I know how much power they have from living in Northern Canada for most of my life. Okay, that's one thing. And I think if you know band office, any of the national and provincial bodies, you just have to write and just lay it on. And I just say, this is a picture for me of what genocide looks like for my First Nations people. It's textbook. It's so textbook. It's unbelievable. So another thing I saw, I've had about 3 posts. I got them and I just found them. I mean, I didn't ask for them. They were different reporters that spoke about the reason that Israel is doing what it is doing. Has nothing to do with Hamas. It's all smokescreen, like everything else the United States does and Israel does, is because there is a canal that's been being built, and they in the hills that I'm not so detailed like you, Eve, but anyway, they have put all this nuclear bombs in this hill, which is going to make a canal that's going to go through to where Egypt has where everybody goes through the blocks, the Suez Canal, right? And everybody has to go all the way around to get through. And the Chinese are wanting the Belt and Road and everything. And Egypt got control of it, wrested it from the colonizers, and they are very wealthy because of it. So what the plan is, going right through with what they're doing is it's going to go right through Gaza and go directly. And they will have, and no one will be able to use that canal unless they pay Israel. So that means the Islamic countries are going to lose out on that, one of the one wealth things that they have guaranteed globally. And so much for the Belt and Road initiatives and everything like that. And I'm not paranoid, but it makes total sense, because she just said, follow the money. Why is now and when and where? And sure, it's Hamas, and it's a really good smokescreen, because that's how they did with Iraq. That's what they've done all the time, all these warmongers. So why would this be any
Elizabeth, do you
different?
have a question? Thanks so much.
I just wanted to ask you
Yeah.
to look into this, Eve. That's what I'm trying to say. I don't have a question. This was so the light just went on. It's not like, oh, they hate the Palestinians, they want the land back. They want it, and then they're going to they're moving all the Palestinians. They're not going to get back, and then they're going to put them on a road that nobody can get to.
Okay, thanks, Elizabeth. I have read that as well. That's one theory, maybe part of it. Okay, go ahead, Nadia, you're up next.
Yes, hello. Thank you, Eve, for your presentation. I am also called an anti-Semitic every time I bring up the fact that Israel has been planning to eradicate the Palestinians for a long time. It's part of the Zionist doctrine. But I found a lot of comfort in the Israeli journalist Gideon Levy. He's very, very, very good. I don't know how many of you know him, but if you go on YouTube and listen to him, he's fantastic. And he lays it down as it is. And he says that the only way that Israel is going to stop is if the United States puts pressure on it. And I think that the best way for us all to put pressure on our government is to send a written letter by post, not through email, to our federal representatives, federal, provincial, municipal. That's the best way to put pressure on our governments. And I also found something, I don't know if you found that, Eve, but I found people making the amalgam, the sort of mixing together the fact that Hamas and the Islamists have a project of Islamization of the world, which is the same thing as the Zionist project, but somehow they don't see the Zionist project. They only see the Islamization or the will to bring about an Islamic state. So it's amazing. The ignorance of what people are doing. But I think the best way to maybe to put pressure on our governments is to write a personal, nice letter, not, not insulting or anything else, to the to your deputy, to your MP, and maybe that will bring results. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I think writing letters is a good thing, but I think we're at a point where we need to have mass people in the street. And I think not even just mass people in the street, we also need to be, like when Melanie Joly speaks anywhere, that people are there and protesting, and other sort of more disruptive kind of actions. Because this is, we need to be escalating the protests, right? And we need to be doing, it's really good to have a mass demonstration like this weekend across the country, but in places where there's a bigger body of people like Montreal or Toronto or Vancouver or Ottawa, that we should be doing a couple during the week, during different smaller actions, and keeping it in the news, keeping it all the different MPs and politicians that have condemned Hamas's actions on October 7th, they should be forced to answer why they haven't condemned 5,000 Palestinian children being killed, stuff like that. So I think we need to be raising it in every, all kinds of different forums, but specifically doing it in more disruptive ways, gradually more and more disruptive ways. And we see that there's blockades. I saw a video from Tacoma in Washington State by Seattle around Goods Arms Company, Israeli arms firm, I believe, that's trying to dock some ship. Also in Barcelona, dock workers are refusing to deal with this, to load a ship that has Israeli weaponry, or to go to the IDF, or I'm not exactly sure the details, but that type of thing where we escalate more protests at arms companies that are delivering weapons, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, Al, can you, I asked you to unmute. Can you, Al Content, can you unmute, please? Okay, go ahead, Al.
Hey, Yves. First time I've been on here live. Thanks again for everything that you've done. I just wanted to add, you mentioned the thing about Kurt Phillips. You're so bang on about that. If you look at that whole crew of people, Phillips, Dan Cullen, Jesse Brown, so many of these people who are on like the liberal left, you go through their timeline and there's just nothing at all about anything about, what Israel is doing. But they are very adamant on all of the anti-Semitism and also disinformation I'm seeing that they're saying about things that Israel is doing. So you're bang on about that. The question I wanted to ask you though, we're seeing lots of people in Israel society protests in the streets calling for Netanyahu to be jailed, or I see that there's like reports saying that like 70% of citizens say that he should resign. Do you think that there's anything behind that could actually like cause something to happen in Israel where like the actual citizens would be able to do something to stop this, as opposed to us being able to do anything? Because it seems like if anyone's going to be able to do it, it would be them, because then that would change their whole message of they want for them to be able to have this project if the citizens are saying we want Netanyahu gone? Do you think that there's anything there? Or do you think that's just smoke and mirrors?
Yeah, I don't think that there's not, and I don't say this with high level of confidence, but my impression is that Israeli society has gone, you know, before it's very anti-Palestinian. It is very, to put it bluntly, it's very colonialist and Jewish supremacist. And since October 7th, that's gone, you know, that's magnified. My understanding is that there is a movement of around family members of the hostages that are, you know, pushing for policies that will restrain the violence and that will you know, look to make some sort of deal with Hamas. And I do think that Israeli society takes its cues, you know, pays attention to the rest of the world. And, you know, when there's 50,000 people on the streets of Montreal and whatever it was in Washington, D.C., hundreds of thousands, London, you know, wherever, that emboldens the more progressive internationalist forces within Israel. And I saw a protest. I don't know how big it was in Tel Aviv, but it seemed like it was, you know, it was a protest of some size. It sounds like right-wing Israelis came and tried to like intimidate them. So that kind of stuff matters. I wouldn't put too much stock in you know, even if Netanyahu disappears, I'm not sure that's going to radically shift Israeli policy towards Palestinians. I think you know, Netanyahu represents and people like Smoltrich and others are even worse, and so less bad is less bad, and I generally take a less bad option. But I think that specifically with regards to Gaza, we're seeing that it's sort of much of the whole political spectrum is on board for the slaughter. And how long that will last, I'm not sure, but I don't expect that much dissent within Israel.
Okay, Nahid, you're up.
Yeah, thank you. The intimidation of the Canadian citizens for free speech is very serious with the Zionist campaign. At the Faculty of Medicine here, University of Ottawa, a bunch of faculty have written a letter against one medical student, pressuring the dean of the faculty against that medical student to punish him or expel him or whatnot, because in the social media with his friends, he has said something pro-Palestinian and they consider that anti-Semitic. So my question to Eve is, do you know of a human rights lawyer or any place that all these cases actually should go to some panel or a group of lawyers or something to stand up and push back, because it's only going to get worse. It's going to the censorship, like nobody dares to say what they really think, because that where they work or study, they are under immense pressure. So I'm just
well, I think the first thing, if this person or people who are supporting this person should probably get in, if it's in Ottawa, with Yavar Hamid, who's a lawyer there. Karen Rodman with Just Peace Advocates has been coordinating some of this lawyer, like Palestine legal kind of lawyer support stuff. So there's definitely lawyers who are into taking these cases on pro bono to defend those supporting Palestinian rights. Now, at a more general level, I agree with you. I mean, there's this whole issue with Nora Loretto tweeted out yesterday. I can't remember the exact words, but something like who had Zionist doctors as some of the worst of humanity on their scorecard for 2023. And she's right. There's these, so at McMaster and Hamilton, there's a doctor at the who now, fortunately, she's under a lot of heat because she said basically deport them, deport all. She was tweeting about deporting all these pro-Palestinian. Then there's that Brian Goldman, who's a CBC commentator, doctor. He's just a total fanatic. There was a letter of a bunch of doctors in Israel calling for bombing the Al Shifa hospital. I think like more than 100 doctors signed this. Someone joked to say, make sure to take all their names down, so when they return to their practices in New York City, that that people target them. So there is this the medical world. I mean, I've talked about the University of Toronto, that whole anti-Semitism kerfuffle that went on there, which was really basically the Zionist doctors, generally the older doctors who basically freaking out about how there was younger, often Muslim or non-white doctors coming through the ranks that were standing up with Palestinians, and there's a huge kerfuffle about that back in 2021. And it's been playing itself out over the last, sort of 2 years. So the medical world is one of the domains where there's these huge battles, and obviously there are doctors who stand up with Palestinian rights, or medical students standing up with Palestinian rights who are being punished and attacked, and that's just one of the domains where these battles are taking place. So there's pushback. But there are, I think that. On the free speech question, this business, they're trying to like ban demonstrations, hate this, hate that. I think it's mostly failed. I mean, when you get the biggest demonstrations around international affairs in 20 years, the intimidation tactics are clearly not succeeding, and they're probably succeeding to an extent, and they're deterring some people from raising their voices, coming to the demos, whatever. But they are obviously not fully succeeding. Yeah.
Is
Yeah,
IHRA
okay, sorry.
law now?
No, it's not law, but it's guiding. It guides, like the whole Heritage Canada grants. If you get a grant from Heritage Canada, you have to sign a statement that says you adhere to the IHRA. And so theoretically, at least, people who get those grants and then later on say something critical of Israel, they could be sort of effort to take the money back. But it's not law in a sense that you go to jail if you contravene the IHRA. It has some impact around, like I said, something like Heritage Canada grants.
Okay, Ifo, you're up.
Yeah, I was at a rally here in Halifax, Nova Scotia. We had at least 1,000, probably more than 1,000, that came out to it, including a reporter who was fired because she was Palestinian, and she said that she has no issue with the Jewish people, but she believes that Zionism must end. And that was taken as anti-Semitic, and she was fired. Which is, it's just funny. When I say funny, not funny in a laughing way, but just funny because we're in Canada that claimed that they have support for the rights of people in Ukraine. And if there was anybody in Ukraine saying that we do not believe that the Russians who are attacking us, or the powers that are controlling these attacks, that this should end, that would not be seen as, if they say we love Russian people, but we just don't like the people that are attacking us, that doesn't sound problematic at all. To me, that sounds like an almost extremely weak and somewhat charitable response. But you see the clampdown, and I heard that there were some workers in Toronto who came out at the restaurant. I think it was Monty's that came out, and they just clapped at the people who were walking by, and they were also fired. So we live in this country that claims that they have universal human rights, that claims that you have freedom of association, that claims all these things. So the question is that I'm wondering is, where is our federal human rights legislation on this? And why are then any of the so-called groups that are supposed to be champions of human rights in Canada, why are they silent on this? It's a silence that I find deafening. Just wondering what your thoughts are on this.
No, I mean, I agree. I mean, the example of the Moxie's restaurant in Toronto a week ago, 2 weeks ago, whenever the demonstration passed, there were people who came out and clapped, people, servers or whatever, waiters or waitresses or whatever, but clapped, and they lost their job. The Zionists online had a whole huge brouhaha, and these people got fired for coming out and clapping when a pro-Palestinian demonstration went by. The case you mentioned, there's another, another woman, one a Palestinian, I think another one's just of Arab descent, CTV and Global reporters who got turfed because of what they were writing on their social media. There's innumerable examples now of people being fired or being targeted for one Palestinian Air Canada example, the pilot getting fired. So this is happening. Mark Miller, the immigration minister, he tweeted on Saturday, this about the criminal code, and basically trying to link, talking about the demonstrations and say the criminal code says hate is this or that, and he's giving support to the crazies in the Israel lobby and in the right-wing media who are saying all these protests is hate. He's like, just putting out the criminal code out there, these demonstrations are happening, and suggesting that they may be hate demonstrations. And that's what, Olivia Chow did, the former NDP MP, now mayor of Toronto. That's what she did early on. And that the police departments have done that too. For the most part, they're not actually going to that next step of actually trying to criminalize what's happening, but they are suggesting these demonstrations may be, hateful and therefore could violate the criminal code. And they're creating a climate that means that Moxies will fire, people who literally just walked outside from, I don't know if they're on their break or not, and clapped to people who are, walking by. So it's a climate of fear. It's a climate of intimidation. The people who are all about cancel culture, the right-wing forces who just love talking about cancel culture, they of course have no problem with the very obvious and aggressive cancel culture that we're seeing, because on this issue they're on board. So yeah, it's amazing really that if you go big picture, I mean, the people who are opposing genocide are the ones who are being targeted. The people who are openly saying, no ceasefire, we have to, fight till the end of, till Hamas is eliminated, who are either explicitly or implicitly supporting 5,000 Palestinian children being killed. They're in the ascendants. They're the ones who are, there's no career consequences. There's no, it's remarkable. It is what it is. That's the political culture we live in, and we have to do what we can to upend that.
Okay, now should we take one last question from Niobe?
Yeah, we're getting
over time.
Yeah.
So Niobe, you're up now.
Thanks. I'm just wondering if we can emphasize a little more the fact that Canadian companies are making huge profits from the war. And for people, I put it on the chat for people who are not affiliated with any organization, the Canada-wide Peace and Justice Network. A lot of the organizations that are affiliated have gone to the sites of offices where the companies are making war materials. And there is one in Vancouver, an office. I'm not sure exactly what they produce, but if there are people here from Vancouver that would be interested in staging a rally there, to please message me. And again, there are other cities that have locations. That's another thing that you could do, is rally at those offices. Thank you.
Yeah, World Beyond War has a whole list on their site of different companies selling to the IDF.
Okay, so I think we're out then. Eve, thanks so much, Eve, and thanks everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
See you
Have a good
next
night.
week.
Take
Night.
care.